Kyle Whittingham is now taking over as the head coach at Michigan. Bryce Underwood is back. Savion Hyder, the 5-star running back, extremely talented back for the Wolverines. That tandem is going to be good this year, but how good? Grant, you look at what Michigan is. You look at the state of that athletic department in that program, and it's had a cloud hanging over it this entire off season. And you still see these prediction magazines, you still see these analysts, you still see people saying this is still a top 15 program. It wouldn't feel that way, the way the media is talking about them in terms of news, but there's good football players up there. But how good are they? Are they good enough to beat Ohio State? Michigan has won 4 of the last 5. Ohio State finally snapped the streak a year ago. What is this game going to look like? What is this program going to look like under Kyle Whittingham? He's a great coach. He's probably the best option that Michigan could have had to, I'm going to break this rule anyway, replace Sharon Moore and really turn the page from the Jim Harbaugh era. And Whittingham is a great coach. He was outstanding at Utah. He now brings that into Michigan. Identities are very similar in terms of program and in terms of style of coaching. Defense is going to be good. What do you see from Michigan, Grant? Bryce Underwood has to take a step forward this year. He mechanically was off a lot a year ago, and he left some throws on the field against the Buckeyes last year, but now they've got to come to Columbus. And this crowd in Columbus is going to be waiting for him, and I'm sure the signage is going to be pretty entertaining from the fan base.
Yeah, it's a very interesting season for Michigan. You know, like you said, there's been a lot of, happenings in the program lately. But beyond that, the program it's kind of been floating in the wind since, Moore had taken over. And Underwood, Bryce Underwood, he's been underwhelming. There's no doubt about it. And for Michigan to be anything close to a 10-win team this season, Underwood has to take a considerable step forward. I don't think there's any doubt that Kyle Whittingham is the right kind of guy to right the ship at Michigan. He's a really good coach, and he's the kind of disciplinarian in the right kind of ways to take over a program like this. So I think as far as coaching goes, I think they're in a good spot. I think that was a really good hire. But you come into the year, Michigan hosts Oklahoma. Very good team. John Mateer's coming back. Who knows how good they are. A lot of people have them as a top 6-7 team in the country. Then Michigan, they host Penn State. Who knows what Penn State's going to be like? But they play Indiana, they play Oregon, and they play Ohio State after the Oklahoma game. Michigan has a challenge of their own this year to be able to right the ship, not only in the program, but to get out of this rut that the program's been in for a couple of years. And they were 6-6 one year, or 7-5 one year, going to last year where they weren't able to beat Ohio State. They fall to 9 wins. They can't beat Texas in the postseason. All of a sudden Michigan's back into this lull, that they had to do what they had to do to get out of back in the J.J. McCarthy era. But, this year is going to be a very telling year for Michigan's football program in general.
You look at the schedule, Grant, you're mentioning Oklahoma, you're mentioning Indiana, you're mentioning Oregon, you're mentioning Penn State, and ultimately Ohio State. How many of those games should Michigan win? I think that's the question of, you're saying this is a pivotal year for the Wolverines. Well, I see 5 games that if you look at brands, they could lose games, right? But for Michigan, how many of those games should they win? What really are the expectations in Ann Arbor right now? Because if you see those 5 games, you're like, okay, could this team be 7-5? Could they be 10-2? Could they be better than that or worse than 7-5? I don't think they're worse than 7-5. I think that's the floor right now, unless the wheels really fall off. Not that there's any wheels left. But Kyle Whittingham is there. Kyle Whittingham is a good coach, and he will steady the ship. I think that's the thing. Bryce Underwood is a key factor because he has good coaching around him now to develop him. You saw his mechanics being off a year ago. He just looked unnatural in his throwing motion. He's talented, but how talented can he be at Michigan this year? It's like a redo of his freshman season almost, because he didn't really have intentional quarterback coaching. But Savion Hyder, the new running back at Michigan, that tandem, can Michigan get back to that old smash mouth football? I think that they can. I just don't think that they're going to have enough to beat Ohio State. So when I'm looking at everything Ohio State has back, Julian Sayin, Jeremiah Smith, Brandon Innes again, you have the transfer receivers in Devin McEwen and Kyle Parker, you have Austin Sarabelt and Carson Hinsman and Luke Montgomery back on that offensive line, Bo Jackson, Isaiah West, Legend Bay. I'm just naming playmakers for the Buckeyes. They know what it's like to beat Michigan now. There are players on Ohio State's roster that know what it's like because they did it last year, and they're going to want to do it again, as always. And I think they're veteran enough to weather any storm that Michigan could throw at them, whether they come out and go 4 wide and Bryce Underwood thinks he's going to sling the ball around the yard all afternoon, or if Michigan wants to line up and play smash mouth football like I expect them to do. Either way, I think Ohio State can play either game and be comfortable and also not flinch. Last year, Julian Sayin threw an early pick. Ohio State steadied the ship, and they came back, and they won the game 27-9. Now you're at home. Now you're more veteran. You have the experience. You've done it. The monkey's off your back. There's no pressure. So, Grant, I think Ohio State beats Michigan for a second year in a row.
Yeah, I think, the advantage of Ohio State being able to come back home for this game, again, it's the environment's going to be second to none. Ohio State fans have been waiting to welcome Michigan back after the very shocking loss in 2024 for a long time. There was a lot of disrespect on that field. And I think, beyond the rivalry, a lot of guys in the program have a chip on their shoulder from that game, coaches, players, whatever it be. That combined with, the talent gap that is still probably there. I think Ohio State comes out with a W, finally stretches back-to-back years with a win over Michigan. And, all is right at that point in Columbus. But, I think, it's an 11-1 Ohio State team, fresh off a home win against Michigan, heading to the playoff. Should be exciting times.